And I think I'm going to turn on closed captioning so that we've got the transcript just in case. Okay. So we're going to go slow motion here tonight. Our guest speaker had a flat tire. We have a little bit of business to conduct beforehand, so Anne's going to kick us off here.
All right. We are going to talk about the radio exercise coming up, and this is connected with Cascadia Rising 2022. This is the ACS's exercise, and I'll just describe our portion of it. So it is Saturday, June 11th. Please mark your calendars. Starts for our side around 9 o'clock. The ACS folks are getting together a little bit earlier, but for us, it's closer to 9. The priority is to get an ACS member to the participating hubs, which is why we're talking about it today. So the goal of this exercise from the ACS standpoint is to get ACS members out into the field. That's number one. Number two is to test out the quality of signal without repeaters. So for those of you that aren't radio types, this is a repeater, kind of looks like a cell phone tower, similar kind of concept. It allows radio operators to transmit longer distances. So it takes that message, modifies it just a smidge as far as putting it on a different frequency and sends it back out to anyone who can listen. So this exercise, one of the things they're trying to learn is what happens that theoretically, this is day 3 after a large earthquake. So the repeaters that had batteries have all died by this time. The ones that have generators might still be operating, but we're going to kind of assume that all the repeaters are down. Could we talk to one another, hub to hub, hub to sector, sector to EOC, all those kinds of pathways? Could we talk to each other without repeaters? So it's called simplex when you're just going radio to radio, and we're trying to figure out what that would look like for us. So they also may use a hub as a relay. So kind of a hub would be acting as a repeater, picks up the message from one person and sends it to another spot. So that might get tested. In general, all of the messages they're sending on this exercise, June 11th, are via WinLink, which is email. It's not FLDigi, it's not voice, it's WinLink. So it's a third different type of way of transmitting information. So WinLink is global radio email. A few messages probably will be sent via FLDigi, which is it's like sending, I don't even know. It's like sending a message across radio waves without any kind of voice. And then maybe just some straight up voice messages will be sent as well. That's it. I just want to let you guys know about it. We will be sending out a sign up list if you want to be involved. The only thing that ACS members ask of you is that you go out around 9 o'clock, maybe a little bit after, but let's say 9 o'clock. You go out to your hub site and keep an eye out for somebody with radio gear. Chat with them, talk about, yeah, I'll get to you in just a second, Dave. Chat with them, talk about maybe where to set up, help them out if they need anything. So really just wanting to make connections so that the radio operators become more familiar with where the hubs are sitting. So definitely point them to where your box is. And again, if you have an idea of where a good setup might be for them, then that's a conversation to have when you guys meet. So go ahead, Dave is coordinating this whole exercise and he's online with us.
Thank you, Ann. You would think that Ann and I had a conversation about this earlier because what she said, and that's what's going to happen. One of the objectives we have is to kind of reestablish the relationship between individual hams and their favorite hubs. And if you have a favorite ham, make sure that you have them try to participate. And it's not absolutely necessary that they be a member of ACS. So if you have a licensee that is attached to your hub that you would expect to use for communications, please have them participate. It's not absolutely necessary. In fact, it's good practice for us to incorporate non-ACS members into the operation because we have particular administrative steps that we take. So if you have a favorite ham, do that. But the main thing is to start to build that relationship between the folks that you would be working with and your hub. Cindy, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I can't raise my hand as host here. So if we have a favorite ham who is not part of the ACS team, how do they get plugged into the briefing the night before and any instructions the morning of?
That's a good question. The best thing to do is that's a good question, and let me get you a proper procedure for that because it'll be real simple. What we will have is a radio net the night before, but it depends on, you won't know about it if you don't get a text about the whole thing. So let's let me write that down.
Yeah, because we'll have several opportunities to talk to the hub captains ahead of time.
Yeah,
it's going to force us to react to emergent volunteers that are amateur radio operators and figure out how to incorporate them on the spot.
Well, sure, but if there's nobody from ACS at the hub where me and the emergent guy are standing.
Yeah. So that's a good point. And I think one of the things we did have, if you recall, Cindy, is we had a kind of a handout at the hub, Pat, that you could hand to an emergent volunteer, tells them what frequency to check in with. And if they get that far, we can probably get them, we can onboard them with the whole thing.
Yep.
So,
yeah, so if you give us those directions, perfect. That's just what I want you to think.
Yeah,
ahead.
and if we need to update that, Cindy, let me know, because we've got the document. It's like a one-page document. Here's what you do. And
no need to update. Just make sure that frequency that you list in there is one of the ones you have in play on the day of the exercise.
Okay, good. That's still quite current.
And a comment, you can be a little flexible at the hub. Most of your hubs have BTEC V1 radios, correct? Mm-hmm. And you've programmed those listen only for a lot of amateur repeaters that ACS uses. So worst case scenario, you could flip through until you hear us talking and tell the ham they're talking on this repeater or this frequency, and they could tune to it. I mean,
that's good.
There's a way to put them in touch with us.
Yeah, that could be like, if plan A didn't work, that you weren't sending email, and plan B doesn't work, plan C is just scan the radio and get your ham guy to plug in on whatever frequency hears us live, which is what's going to happen in a disaster. This will be great.
So, and I didn't hear you talk about having the hub volunteers providing any injects to the hams. Can we do that? Yeah. Can we still do that? Yeah.
I'm doing that. Yeah. The folks on the call don't need to mess with that.
All right. But the idea is that the responding hub volunteers hopefully will have injects to hand to the ham to do that. Well, yet to be decided.
She's just back in town. You got to give her a few minutes.
That's just the point. The idea is that the hub volunteers are going to give the ham something to do.
Yeah.
And that was the idea. The last thing was, the hams will have some tasks to perform, some reports to file, and they'll do that probably in interaction with the hub volunteers. But I think the key thing here is building that relationship and maybe establishing a sense of teamwork there on the ground, so that the next time we do this, it's the same people and they're just miles ahead. So that's the main thing.
Okay. Excellent. So a little bit more to come on that, but please, once we send out some kind of a survey, respond if you're going to be available and out there that morning, and we will try and get an ACS member out to you.
So then part of this exercise is also we have now our bulk order of the ICS multi-page forms that we have yet to figure out how to distribute to all the hubs. But one of the things that goes along with that is radio messaging and the numbering of the system. And so Carl and the ACS team have developed here's the protocol for how to establish your message numbers. And for us hub people, integral to that is the identifiers that are the radio identifiers for each hub. So I'm going to share my screen because this is an assignment that's going to come out to all the hub captains. I have a file that we've put in our radio folder. I don't know if you can see the path on here, probably not, but it's in Hub Captain Documents, Radio, and it's a spreadsheet in there for right now. We will integrate this into our master list of all the information about each hub. But for purposes of establishing your own hub's identifier, we did a two-step thing here. One is this first column, we just had the computer go, take the first 4 letters of every hub and give them to us. And you can see there's everything in yellow is something that, you know, there's a lot of easts and there's a lot of wests and there's a lot of lakes. And so then Ann and I have gone through and made, so the 2 BALL hubs made 1 Ballard and 1 Bal. So we need everybody to say, I'm good with what the computer gave us or the modification. And I'm going to show you the example here. If I liked Morg for Morgan, I put my name in this column and my co-captain, if I had a co-captain to deal with, so that everybody's on the same page and we're good. If I didn't like it, and here's another example where Ann's like, I'm good with Vict. So she's put her name in there. So we have a live confirmation that somebody's looked at this and we know that's the number assigned. But if somebody didn't like what was done, we don't want you to put okayed. We want you to give us what you really want over here, ABBC or, you know, whatever. And once we have all the hubs who have either said, I accept it, or here's my proposal, because we're going to have to deconflict, you know, whatever people come up with, because they won't necessarily go and look at everything, you know, to double check that there's not already a duplication. So the good thing about this is it lets us touch every single hub, all the hub captains that we know are out there, making sure that they're engaged, because it's kind of a good come out of COVID and out of hibernation exercise for us as well. So I will be sending these instructions and this link out, and we'll start looking for people to fill in the boxes. And if we don't see them filled in, we'll start chasing folks down. And the goal is to have this definitely before the exercise, so that ACS has got the master list and we each have our list at the hub. Carl.
Can we talk just a little bit about the overall numbering scheme? Were you planning to
Not
do
tonight.
that?
No, we're going to have a learning session later.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a hub captain meeting and we'll build it into that, because generally we get more people at the hub captain meeting, and that's 2 weeks before the exercise. So tonight is supposed to be just a deep dive with one topic, but we snuck a few things in and took longer than we thought, because I just saw Consuelo has joined us. So now we can go on to our regular business. So anyway, I wanted to, you know, get this on the recording so people who watch this can see what's going on. Any other general things about that? If not, we'll go ahead and turn this over to Consuelo. Consuelo is, I am really lousy at titles. I don't know if it's senior planner or disaster planner, but she's with the Office of Emergency Management. She is the person who's been tasked to figure out what the city's employee response plan would be in the case of a severe disaster. And so she's going to share kind of the plan as it is now. We want lots of questions because we want to understand what the employees are going to do, and we want to understand what our relationship should be with these locations. So Consuelo, thank you for coming tonight, and take it away.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Cindy, and apologies for my lateness. I had a flat tire and I have been living on a prayer on those tires. So it was finally time for me to do something about that. So I'm Consuelo Crow. I am a planner over at the Seattle Office of Emergency Management. A little bit of my background: I am an anthropologist and I speak 5 languages. I am a member of the Pascua Yaqui tribe. And my role as a planner in OEM is they brought me in to infuse more community-minded policy into their current and existing policies, and also to help update the policies for different disasters and catastrophes that, you know, we are expecting with things like climate change and diversity and that sort of thing. So that's what I do. So a lot of my work is around at least currently, heat planning, extreme heat planning, but also a catastrophic earthquake, beyond disaster, like the worst day of your life, everything is awful. So that's where workforce rallying points come into play. When I joined OEM, they had asked me to develop something that is new in the state of Washington. So we in the city are the only ones who are producing this kind of programming and planning for our employees that are citywide. So I have a slide show that I'm going to share with you and talk through. Now, I won't be able to see you all while I'm doing this.
Ann and I usually watch the chat for you also.
Yeah, thank you so much. That would be super helpful. Questions most certainly encouraged. Let's see. Can you all see that?
Yes.
It looks good.
Okay. Oh, let me go back. All right. So workforce rallying points are basically designed, usually intended for, any place that has, employees that need to activate in a certain way. Now, for the city of Seattle, we have three primary purposes. Our city of Seattle staff collect into these pre-identified points that we have, and then they are given based on their skill sets, whether they are skill sets that they do at the city as part of their job, or hidden skill sets, which a lot of people have. That includes speaking other languages. Maybe they have, certification in, first aid response, that sort of thing. So we assign them after collecting information on them to figure out where they will be best be placed. So communication and impact assessment will be reported to your group as a hub, as hubs. That we find, and your role is also a collaboration of communication with us. Basically, and I will talk about this in a little bit, we are going to be sharing information with each other, because when we have activated these workforce rallying points, we are going to have an ACS volunteer who's going to show up to each site. So you all will have ham radio speakers who can communicate back and forth. There will be runners. You may have runners as well. One example I can give you that, maybe somebody at a hub would report to us is either, there's a building collapse, or there is a massive fire, something really catastrophic that has come out of this particular catastrophe. But also, if the mayor were to show up at one of your hubs and says, you know what, I cannot get to where I need to be, then you can reach out to us, whatever point, because all of our reporting of information goes directly to the EOC. Now, I personally will not be at a hub. I will be in the EOC.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm one of the people that will be receiving a lot of this information from community, from, our people who are reporting and assigning, points at the hubs, command centers, that sort of thing. We also will be doing a lot of public information distribution. So people will be able to collect, and what I'm doing right now is I'm putting together by census tract, basically an area in which that hub, or the workforce rallying point is supposed to cover. And I'm looking into the demographics of those areas by census tract to figure out who lives there, what they need, what the socioeconomic status is, the most commonly spoken language, and we're developing short messages that are, leaflets that will be handed out to people as our field coordinators are going to be going out and doing damage and impact assessments. And we can also provide you with your different hubs, different articles of that kind of information, and certainly in language if that's necessary. So the intent is to set this up within 24 hours of a Cascadia type earthquake. Like, we're talking calamity. So if we have like a 7.0, you know, people can still get around, people can still access services or resources. This is not the catastrophe that I'm talking about. I'm talking about like things are leveled, communications are down. So what happens with that is that, you know, if those communications are down, the employees that are going to be showing up typically are already available for assignment. And I'm doing an analysis by zip code right now for Seattle employees to figure out where they live, what, you know, issues they're going to have either getting into Seattle, or if they're living in Seattle, where they're going to most likely show up. So available for reassignment, or if they cannot reach their leadership, they cannot reach their pre-assigned destination, such as, you know, a city light person cannot make it to where they know they're supposed to be, they can show up to a hub and figure out what's going on and how to get to where they need to be. So they receive information, they understand the situation, then there's going to be communication all around, especially coming through the EOC, figuring out, you know, exactly what's happening and what's needed. Let's see, impacts can include that departmental leadership, that loss of safe work facility. So if we had people who are working in, you know, a substation, and for some reason it's, you know, caught on fire or something like that, they will not go to that site, because fire is going to be the, you know, first responders of everything. Ultimately, in a situation like this, they can go to a hub and either be reassigned or be told, you know, you can't do this, so we're going to give you something else to do.
Can I ask, did I just understand? Do you mean hub, or do you mean the rally?
I'm sorry, workforce
Thank
rally.
you. I was like, I'm going to have firefighters
Sorry.
show up at my station and ask where to go?
I'm
Yeah.
a little tired.
We'll keep
I
each other straight.
apologize. So we have 7 identified city operated sites around the city. And some of you may have seen the maps that have been done about the bridge collapse situation that we expect to happen, because our infrastructure is so old and it has not been fixed in a way that will survive necessarily. So it's going to create these islands that people won't necessarily be able to get around. So we tried to put a workforce rallying point into each of these different islands, so there's a space for people to collect. So the field observers are going to be really key in this effort. City staff who report to their WRP will receive assignments based again on their skill sets. They're going to receive training. They're going to conduct damage and impact assessments. So what they're going to do is they're either going to walk, or they're going to ride bikes, or whatever mode they have available to them. They're going to go around to a very specific set mapped out site for them, where they can take a look and see, you know, what structures are down, what people are doing, what the needs are for the community. And that way we understand what the gaps are that need to be filled for people. So they're going to document this, and then when they go back to the WRP, they're going to report that, and that reporting will go into the EOC so that we can distribute resources and people as best as possible. So I want to talk about community lifelines from a FEMA perspective, and we'll take a look at what that actually looks like in a little bit. So FEMA has designed this programming where they have designated community lifelines, and so they have these symbols that you can use to identify what these things are good for. So we're talking community clinics, drugstores, grocery stores, convenience stores, gas stations, all of these things that the community needs to access in order to obtain resources. So looking at food and water and other life-sustaining supplies. Making contact with them if it's not collapsed and unusable, making contact with people who may still be in those gas stations, grocery stores, to find out, you know, what their capacity is, who's still around, you know, is this a space that's safe to inhabit in the first place, or do they feel like it's not safe to be in anymore? You know, just all that general information gathering that we are going to need to understand the gaps in that community and what we can do to infuse the gaps. Now, granted, if this is going to be a catastrophe, it's going to be a while before they're able to get resources from the outside, because we expect there's going to be an isolation phase based on infrastructure collapse, bridges and roads and things like that. And so right now what I'm doing is I'm working with the Coast Guard, because they will end up being the people who patrol the coastlines, and getting anything in and out is going to be at their discretion. So we're trying to figure out with them what can and cannot come through, what it's going to take to get certain resources around. Because if you have somebody in South Park who has a trolley full of fish, for example, you know, can they move up the coast to Central Seattle or, you know, Magnolia or something like that and distribute fish where people can like cook outside, things like that. And again, we're going to distribute a lot of in-language community information. Some of it's going to be ad hoc as we go along, but I'm going to have a lot of preset stuff that's going to be developed in at least 19 languages. That's going to tell people, you know, stay away from the power lines. How do you turn off your gas? How do you turn off that water? How do you turn off the electricity? You know, if things have become dangerous for them.
So there's a question in the chat, but I'm going to let you go a little. Do you show a map of the isolation areas? Or
I can bring that up in a second. We can look at that at the end.
That might help answer the question first, because it's a kind of weirdly detailed question.
Okay, so, great.
So I love the other question is, you had mentioned that volunteers could be walking around handing out translated materials. So that's stuff that you're going to pre-stage at the rally point and will be immediately available. And anything unique that says, here's where the shelters are set up in your island, that has to come later when that's established and translated and printed and ready for distribution. Okay, thank you.
That's absolutely correct. And we are also connecting with a lot of different media sources, certainly cultural media sources to distribute language for us, because we won't necessarily have the ability to do just-in-time translation at that time. So if we can, you know, get with them to help us distribute translated information in a language that is appropriate, then that's super helpful. But we are keeping containers with preset supplies in order for our employees to show up and set up that workforce rallying point, everything that they need, including a binder. And Cindy and Ann already know this, but I'm going to give the hubs a modified version of that particular binder that workforce rallying points are going to have. You don't need all the, you know, extras and stuff like that. So I'm going to pare it down so that you all understand like what we're looking at, what we're asking for, you know, communication styles, things like that. So you will have that, and we can, when those are ready, we can go over those again so that we can talk about what that means. So in part with our field observers, we're going to have damage and impact assessment forms. So this is the quick and dirty. Fire department goes out and does a windshield check, but they're going to be limited to where they can get their service vehicles around. So with, excuse me, the city employees, again, they're going to be on foot, they're going to be on bike, they're going to be, you know, in different ways of modality. And so they are going to walk around with these documents and document every individual situation that we need to know about so that we can address it as soon as possible. Now, this is still in draft form. This is not the final draft of it because we still have questions and concerns about it. But I did develop this just to give an idea of the things that we could be and should be looking at as field observers to record and document. And this is, of course, you know, city documents. So we retain these for learning purposes, but also, you know, future stuff. So we're going to look at like, what is the category? If you see here at the top, it's like debris removal. Does it, is it emergency protective measures? So you list a category, where this place is located. Are there language services that are needed? What languages those are? A brief description of the damage that this person is witnessing. And then also, again, based on FEMA impact assessment and the estimate number of like injured, fatalities, reported missing and trapped. So we're going to look at in a second, the damage types that for the impact assessment: destroyed, major, minor, and habitable. And then this is the point where this is up for discussion among us here at the city, is the, how quickly can people actually respond? It's urgent, immediate response. We don't know that can happen. And that can literally mean 12 to 24 hours. So we have to work through that so that there isn't a misunderstanding of how quickly things can be responded to. Community-based services, what's around, what do they need, what do they have? Sometimes communities will have, most of the time, will have already started response efforts among themselves. It could be, a makeshift shelter. It could be a makeshift clinic where they're, treating people. Now, one of the things I really want to drive home with you all is that our employees who are out doing this field observer work are not looking to interfere with community activations unless we see something that is so detrimental that it's going to cost several lives. We are not going to interfere. That is not our role. We are looking at the bigger picture and the larger things. So if we see something like that, we're going to ask them, what are your gaps? What do you need? How long do you have provisions for? So we're going to look at that and just let them be and let them do their thing. Because the reality is, in Seattle and other major metropolitan areas, we have a lot of people who have come from places where they've endured war, famine, all sorts of things, and they're going to have their own methods of dealing with these things based on their cultural knowledge and their past experiences.
Consuelo, before you leave that forum, there's been several comments. So suggestion that you have a space for date and time, because as we learn, the situation always evolves.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is you're not seeing the entire form. There is a date and time situation, but you're right. There should be a date and time for each of these individual reports.
Right.
So I will make that modification.
Okay, and then there's a who's your source? And I assume if we're not seeing the whole form, that's the submitter. Is it an agency? What I thought I heard you say was, this is what you're going to send employees who are assigned out of the workplace rally point. These pre-printed forms will be available, and these will be city trained people who you work through the what's red, what's yellow, and they know how to collect this information.
That's right. So once we get this all solidified, we are going to be socializing this among City of Seattle employees. And honestly, I'm pushing right now as making this for every new employee one of their required trainings. Yeah.
So the suggestion is not just the name of the person who's collecting the information, that city employee, but if they're talking to Catholic Services at, on First Avenue, that you guys know who gave them, who is the agent of the information.
Yes, and because you're not seeing the whole form, that information is documented up to the fact that we're going to report their union. If they're a union member, we will know that as well.
See, you got really smart hub people. We're all thinking the same.
Yeah.
And then the third thing specific to the form was how it's from an ACS person. So the workplace employee will go back to where they came from, and the ACS person there will transmit this into the city.
Yes, that is correct. So that person will go back. Now there's going to be a hierarchy at this workforce rallying point. And so there will be somebody in charge of that point. And so that information gets reported to them. They work with ACS to get it disseminated to the EOC. so that we can report out to the people who need to know that information.
Okay. And have you guys decided if these or if these rally points are the new ACS sector location, or is there still field sector locations and workplace rally points? Has ACS and you guys agreed on anything yet?
So the only agreement that we have made, and I see you, Carl, the only agreement that we have made is that there will be a representative who will be given a binder to report to a specific rallying point. What ACS does outside of that is up to them.
Okay. So
I should also let you know that I have been working with Parks and Seattle Center, different city-owned, city-run entities, and we have been given permission at these sites and other sites to set up new antennas, permanent antennas, but also have places to make available to set up extra antennas if needed.
Perfect. So for the hub captains, right now, this means we have two paths into the city. We have an ACS location at the workforce rally locations, and we may still have an ACS location in each of our sectors that is the normal head HQ of that sector field team. So stay tuned, that may evolve, especially if they get permanent antennas set up.
That definitely may evolve, but the only agreement between us and ACS is that there will be somebody who is given a binder and expected to show up to these workforce rallying points.
Great.
Carl?
Cindy, please don't confuse the workforce rally points with ACS sectors.
I know, that's what I'm saying. They're two distinct things, and
Right.
hubs can go to either one of those two places if they remain distinctly different.
I'm sorry, what was that?
If there's no radio operator and we're putting a kid on a bike, they've got two places hopefully nearby.
Okay.
And Catherine, I have not forgotten your question. I'm just waiting until we get to the map.
Okay. So the damage types that you see here are based on FEMA. Now, I took this from, I based this one for Seattle purposes and needs from the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, who took from FEMA. So you see that there's the damage definitions, the general description, so that they have a guideline to determine what they're looking at, to give us the best possible picture of what is happening at that particular site. And one of the things that I did was, if you see at the bottom, estimated water depth, because we will, in a situation like that, we will have seisures, we will have tsunamis of unknown proportions, because there's a lot of work and a lot of data and a lot of mapping being done right now to reevaluate what kind of water level situations we're having. The current model right now says that we are going to receive flooding. If you think about Pioneer Square in downtown, my office is at 5th and Washington, which is Pioneer Square and the International District. There will be water a block away from me. That kind of flooding will happen. So what I've done is I've taken everyday objects that we're all very familiar with and translated that into inches and centimeters, because not everyone understands inches as well as centimeters based on a variety of things. But this way, everyone has an understanding and a baseline to judge water levels without putting themselves in danger trying to physically measure that. They can eyeball this now. And so that keeps people safer, but also gives them the ability to do that visual assessment and move on. Oop. So this is an example of one that I mocked up for South Park neighborhood. It's real, but it's not official yet. So what I've done is I've looked at the community lifelines based on FEMA, and we have different things like food and water, shelter, hazardous materials, transportation. And so what I've done is I have listed out different things and where you can find places that will need to be looked at. So by census tract, when that field observer is going out, they're going to be required to take a look at certain sites as community lifelines to figure out what the situation is, what can we use, what can't we use, is it totally destroyed, are there people congregated there, things like that. So this gives people an idea of what's available and what's around and who to make contact with while they're out doing their overall field observations.
So a question has come in specifically on that. So if
Yeah.
you've got city employees out and they have, I'm going to pick an easy column, they've gotten to fuel data from those two locations.
Yeah.
They're full and they're both dispensing. How does that information get to the hub who needs it just as importantly as the EOC?
So this is where our communications come in with collaborating in a situation like this, because hubs, we're looking to you to report into us at the workforce rallying points what it is you see and what you need. So there's going to be a version of this sort of field observation from hub people. We're not expecting you to go out in the same way that Seattle employees are going to be doing that. But if you see something or if you need something, that can be reported into the workforce rallying point. And then we make note of that so that we understand that there is greater need out there. We need extra eyes.
So our previous arrangement was we would radio that in.
Yes.
And so you're saying now that we're going to, instead of radioing it directly through ACS, we need to take it in through the rally point?
So with an ACS representative available at each workforce rallying point.
No, I may have an ACS person at my hub.
Mm-hmm. So this is an opportunity for people at the hubs to report in to the larger structure, which is us at the city,
right,
to let us know that you all have this need or that you're seeing something that needs to be addressed that we're not seeing.
Right. The current system is through ACS at our hub or at a field sector. So I'm asking if you're changing that from changing it and saying now it will only go in through the rally point, or are you adding the rally point as a third way to get it to you?
I'm adding the rallying point as another means of reporting information and need.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then it's the reverse question is what was in the chat. It's if you know that those two gas stations have gas, but we haven't sent anybody there, we didn't know that, but you have that information. How does the hub in that neighborhood, that census tract, get that information from you? So maybe that's something to work on. It's kind of that dual flow.
Reframe your question for me.
So the Sherry's truck stop is quite a ways from actual South Park. And so we may not have somebody go there immediately. You know,
but we will.
Yeah. And so when you find out, are they going to stop by the hub and say, by the way, copy all this down from me before I send it into the city? Or how do we get that from you guys?
So that information can be produced for the hub's purposes. So when we have somebody report back to the workforce rallying point, they're going to be reporting this. The ACS person can report it both to the hubs, but also to the EOC.
Oh yeah, that's of course, you know, if we're monitoring the ACS channels, then we should be able to get it. Catherine, does that answer your question then? Listen to what's being transmitted on ACS and you'll find out.
Perfect. As long as we're all communicating and we're all communicating correct information to the right people.
Absolutely. And that's the whole point of this collaboration between us, is making sure that everybody is getting the same information so that everybody's aware of what's happening. Carl?
A quick question, procedural policy more than anything.
Yeah.
We communicate information that we get in, I'm talking ACS at the moment, back to the EOC.
Yeah.
The only information right now that we, by our own policy, send out is information that comes from the JIC. The JIC speaks, the city speaks with one voice, and that voice comes out of the JIC. So it's my expectation that all this information that's being gathered would be funneled into the EOC, but we would not necessarily have the authority to redistribute it into the community just
No.
within ACS. So no, you shouldn't expect the hubs to get it from ACS. You should expect information disseminated from the EOC, which we may be the channel you're disseminating it.
I'm going to be
So-
listening to the radio. I'm going to be listening to the South Park.
So if
People
you
say that the-
drop and hear something, that's fine, but it's not our position to redistribute that information.
Nope, I'm
No.
listening to the airwaves. I'm picking off what's important coming out. I understand that, yes, the announcements have to come out of the JIC, but it
Mhm.
seems crazy to find out that there's fuel at these two gas stations, have it go into the city, have it mull around for 15 hours, and then get sent back out to South Park. That's crazy.
And by then there won't be gas at
Yeah,
those
that's right.
Right, right.
And the faster you get the information, the faster that gas is going to go away.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And
And
so-
Susanna does point out that messages may not be sent by voice. So yeah, that's probably
Yeah.
likely that those forms are going to be transferred onto WebESC.
Most of that information won't be sent by
It will.
voice.
Yeah. So do think about that, Consuelo. If you
Yes.
have information that is important, that you've learned, that maybe the hub may not be aware of,
Yeah.
how can we keep each other, in the response mode and getting the information out where it's needed?
That's where runners come in. We will assign runners, and we will have these folks, if it is not possible to get that information to you all by voice, we have runners that will run wherever information needs to be disseminated.
Cool. And wait, there's two more messages. Hang on.
Yeah.
Susanna's still saying Wind Lake makes it. And Catherine says, we will assign runners to, yes. And I'm going, yes, we're all hearing this kind of for the first time, and we will follow up with the, some protocols that go in the Hub Captain's book that say, here's how we work with all these partners.
Mhm.
And Catherine's going, yeah, and of course, if we don't have enough volunteers to run, grab the first live person on a bike you see.
Right. And that's the thing, is that, we are planning for something that we don't know. We've not seen in this area, that maybe in our lifetimes we've never come close to experiencing.
Do you know of any
So-
city that has had a major disaster, one of these, like earthquake level, not hurricanes where everybody
Yeah.
knows what's going to happen, 12 hours after the hurricane passes by?
So
Similar to
Yeah.
these rally points?
yeah, so I'm getting ATC 20 certified
Mhm.
very soon, and Northridge is a learning lesson for a lot of people. My personal experience, I grew up in California, and I've been in some of the most recent, in the last 30 years, big earthquakes. I was in the Loma Prieta. I was in the Whittier quake, so I've been in some big ones. So from a community member perspective, I can bring that experience in as well, from my perspective and my neighbors and the things that we experienced, as well as looking at it from the systemic, perspective of things learned from people who are emergency responders.
Okay. No other questions in the chat right now, so.
Okay. So here's a bigger look at the FEMA-based guidelines. This is literally from the FEMA site. This is how they define everything. So it enables continuous operation of critical business and government functions that's essential to keeping people safe. And so we can use these symbols and these definitions to apply, how these things can be used. And there is going to be some, creative thinking out in the field when people are doing that field observation stuff for damage and impact assessment. They're going to look at this and say, hey, this specific spot may not be, thought of as providing X resource, but they have it. And so that can be applied as well. So this is how we're going to keep a standardized voice about how we're reporting this and what resources are available or are not available. for the response.
Mhm.
So let's see. And then that is that presentation.
Do you have the map? Yeah, it's the map that, then I'll go back to that question.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up the map. I'm gonna
draft
stop
map.
sharing for a second.
Yep.
While I pull that up. Let's see. Forgive me.
And while you're doing that, unlike
Yeah.
community points of distribution and some other things that the city also works on and has, plans to deploy shelter locations and stuff like that, those are all dependent on what is still standing and what is the terrain and the situation after earthquake. These
Mhm.
rally points are fairly firm, but they all will have a backup location.
Yeah, and they will have a backup location, and part of that is going to be reporting into the EOC. If for some reason that site is no longer safe and they have to shift locations, they will report that in, and also report in what the situation is so that we can also address that.
Yep.
For sure. Let's see. So some of you may have seen this map, some of you may have not.
I don't think we've shared it since you were still working on it.
Okay. Let's see. So have any of you seen this map before? Basically, it's an ugly truth for what we can expect. I'm sorry. It's so touchy and it just moves around like crazy. So we have, this is all like GIS stuff, but all of these red dots are where the bad points are. The points that are going to be failure points. And so if we zoom out just a little bit,
Yeah.
again, it's so touchy. If we look at this, we can look at all of these red points that are throughout Seattle. And we can determine that based on where locations are through these corridors of major arterials and highways and roadways, these are the islands that are going to be created. For example, Queen Anne is going to be its own little island, and so is Magnolia, because there are bridges all through here. So these are the things that we are looking at to figure out and understand how that infrastructure collapse is going to work. That also means for the isolation points, that if resources cannot come in from the outside, then we are going to be on our own for quite a while. Now, I will tell you that I'm also on the CPOD planning committee. There are 4 of us right now doing that work. And so the community resource point of distribution, when you see like a hurricane or whatever on the news and you see like people distributing like bags of food and water and that sort of thing, that is a CPOD. There are currently like some pre-identified sites, but they have not been confirmed. And these sites are going to be distributed, especially throughout the islands. Now, the problem is in that isolation phase, how will they get here? And even if we could get them here by water, for example, how do we get them on land if things are impassable? So we are still working through all of that right now to figure that out. And that's one of the things that Cindy and I briefly talked about. And this is something not to have a discussion for tonight, but ruminate with your group, for future thought. We, with the workforce rallying points, will, in theory, have the ability to reassign people. Those CPODs probably not going to show up until 14 to 21 days out. So that's something you all really need to understand. But the idea that, hub volunteers could, potentially volunteer for CPOD distribution. Now, the other thing that we're working through, because we are an urban site and a lot of this planning done in emergency management is done for rural situations and car situations, we are trying to hybridize situations where we have C-pods that are just walk up or bike up. And then also car sites, and we're trying to figure out which places will be good for that and which will not. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but I'm doing the maritime work, I'm doing the C-pod work, and I'm doing this catastrophic response work right now. And that is what I have for you right now. Things are still being worked out. The workforce rallying points are much closer than anything else. And we are actually going to be introducing this activity to the Cascadia Rising this June.
Okay. Catherine, Catherine's question was around, why don't you leave it up? You didn't, well, that's okay.
You
You
want
didn't
me
have
to?
the one where you have the tentative islands developed.
Yeah, I that map got moved, and so I kept looking around for it and I could not find it. So
Yeah. So Catherine's question, might there be a future iteration for larger areas of the city with communications and infrastructure down? So your plan is that everything is down across the city. And it's really probably not going to be north of the bridge or south of the bridge. It's probably going to be across the city. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty widespread as far as we can tell.
Okay.
So, you know, with the collapse of buildings and roadways and that sort of thing, it can also, you know, unintentionally bring down wires and antennas and things like that. So, again, we're planning for things that we don't entirely personally understand, taking from other places who have experienced things like this, like Japan, you know, and trying to reframe it for our area and our people and, you know, anybody else who may be here. Is it in the daytime? Are we going to have workers stranded here who are going to do really crazy things to try and get back home, especially if they have children, things like that? One of the things that I've been really talking to my team about is thinking about, there's always inherently like a human trafficking component to situations like this, whether it's smuggling people in rickety boats to, you know, get them across, you know, the lake or, you know, in other parts of the sound. All sorts of things can happen. And so these are the things that I think through in order to understand how people will move. Is it nighttime? So, you know, workers won't be necessarily there, but people may be trying to get to their families in other places. So there's a lot to think about and think through. And it's a delicate topic and a delicate process.
Mm-hmm. Anne has put in the chat that the link to the map that you had, Patty Quirk has shared kind of the SDOT, because there's WashDOT and SDOT, you know, versions.
Yeah.
Any other questions, folks? Because this is her discussion point. Any other questions that we haven't come across yet? You know, it sounds like you've got some really good bones built. We got a few details we got to work about, just about how information flows or doesn't flow. And I know that the community lifelines, when you look at that whole list, I'd kind of looked at it and went, there's about 6 on here the hubs are really worried about, because we're really in the sustaining life kind of mode. And so we'll probably have a discussion on which ones we'll be definitely focusing on. Gabrielle has her hand up.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Consuelo, this is great. I think you mentioned that hub volunteers or other volunteers might be able to help with, you use some acronym, distribution points. But
C-pod.
I'm wondering, C-pods, okay. I'm wondering if those rally points are also able to work with volunteers. And of course, the hub, we want volunteers there, but if there was that many volunteers, is there any role for them there besides just taking information there as a runner and coming back? Or should all those volunteers be affiliated with hub sites, really?
Well, before you answer that, Consuelo, I better catch you up. So when Lawrence Eichhorn was SDOT, one of the questions we asked him is, what if we come across a guy who's got a bobcat and he wants to help clear debris? And that causes seizure on the part of the city because they're like, liability, what if he runs over a fire hydrant? Right. So his instructions at the time were, and this was when we had operation centers like, oh, Carl, help me with where the it wasn't workplace rally points, but it was where employees were supposed to go. Oh, West Crest. So at West Crest, there is a city facility. And so if we got one of those volunteers who you guys were going to sign on as a emergent volunteer, emergent, and you were going to register him for liability coverage and give them instructions about how to run their bulldozer on city streets. That was where we were supposed to send that kind of professional CDL license type person. So have those locations gone away and been replaced by these workforce rally points?
Yes, in essence, that is true. Because this is the EOC setting up these workforce rallying points, we cannot be responsible or liable for assigning people outside of the city of Seattle.
Then we need to go back to the departments and ask what they want us to do with those volunteers that they told us they wanted.
Yes.
And here's how we would process them. Yeah.
Yeah, they have to create that and figure out what the liability is, create MOUs, that sort of thing. Now, I will tell you that I have been working for months now with different labor unions that represent inside and outside. And so we are looking into having people from specific unions to who have specific, skill sets that we can use, but we're talking about like engineers and large machine equipment operators, people who are electricians, things like that. But that's going to be something that's inside the city, and we will not be able to take hub volunteers.
Okay, we need to talk then, because this goes back to OSO. Yeah, I mean, it goes back to OSO and how community people who had the right skills could be enrolled into the response as part of the response.
I'm aware, which is why we're talking to the unions, because the unions are a protective measure with that. We're going to have to create MOUs with them, but volunteers at large, community volunteers at large, we cannot take on from this perspective. Now, if there's something you work out with individual departments.
Yes, that's exactly what I was saying. We had worked that out.
Okay.
They were to go to West Crest. And what my question is West Crest no longer going to be a stood up operations center?
In all of my discussions with all the different, activating departments, no one has brought that up. So
I'll talk to Patty, because Patty trained under Lawrence, and so she would understand that. So we get back with you. Yeah, I had not thought about that question before, but we're going to have talented people, and we're either going to put them to work on the roads, or SDOT's going to tell them where to work on the roads, right?
Right. And that's part of why we're also trying to develop the same type of partnership with the Cascadia Bicycle Club. We cannot give them intentional directions. If they show up and need something to do, we can say, these are things that are needed, but we are not giving them official assignments because they are not City of Seattle employees.
Okay, so
that makes sense.
Some people hear the message, 800,000 people at our disposal and not the city's.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it is entirely possible for the city to register temporary emergency workers of anybody that they choose to bring on board. But I think part of this discussion, if a city employee shows up at a hub, they should probably be referred to one of the city rally points, work rally points.
Absolutely. Yeah. We need our people to show up to the rallying points and not the hubs.
And if anybody else shows up at the hub, welcome them with open arms. And then when the city reaches a point where they need to start bringing on emergent volunteers, they can start registering them as temporary emergency workers.
Yeah,
that's right.
The specific example was, I got a guy with a Bobcat down at the West Seattle Golf Course, and he can clear the path to the hospitals.
Yeah.
And Lawrence went, oh, please don't have him do that. Send him to me. And now I'm hearing it's back on me, and I'm going to go plow that road. I'm kind of like being over the top here. But
I know. And so whatever discussions you've had in the past are with those folks. The EOC, this is our position.
Yes.
This is what we're doing. And we're not going to be taking on, like, that has been a non sequitur. Like,
I have to go back to Patty Quirk and say, we had this discussion earlier, and she said, yes, that's still what we want to do. Now I have to go back and say, You will be at West Crest, right? Because that was where I was going to send them. Yeah.
Right. And if she has desire to introduce that, she will need to go through my deputy director and director to talk about that. Like that is well above me.
Oh yeah, no, the
Yeah.
department can do what the department wants to do, right?
Yeah.
Just telling you what the story
Yeah.
is. what you
And
need
so
to
that
do.
also goes back to communities are going to do their own thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we were trying to play nice and not run over
I
their
know.
fire hydrants, but
I appreciate that. I really do. But you know.
okay. Other questions from someone else? Anyone else? None? I mean, this was really good. It gave us a really good insight into some things to work on. We can practice this. We don't not have our date for our next exercise, but it would be fantastic to simulate. There's a rally point down the street, which other end of the park, wherever we're practicing, and how you would communicate and talk about what flows back and forth. So we'll let you know when we pick our date and see if you're able to do any kind of participation in that. Consuelo, you look like you froze on me. Yes, she has. Is there anything else good to the order? I'm going to actually, while we're waiting to see if Consuelo comes back, Ann Bond has a quick announcement for Hub Captains. And
unmute. Hi,
there you
everyone. We have an event happening on May the 25th, which is Wednesday, I think. We're having an urban skills fair at the College Club on the east side of Lake Union at a place called the College Club. Again, it's a rowing club. It's a for members event, but this group has been particularly valuable to us in engaging about the possibility of setting up a temporary shelter for people in the neighborhood following a catastrophic event. And they would like to get rolling by having an urban skills fair for their membership. And I really need some extra volunteers. I've really lost a lot of people in the neighborhood with COVID, and I probably need at least half a dozen members of the Hub community that would come and help for that event. It's kind of 6 to 8 p.m. on, again, May the 25th. And I'll send out an email to you with assignments where you can sign up for a role and see what the talking points are for what you would need to feel conversant or comfortable with manning that station. But I'd be grateful for anybody.
And one of the stations is radio. Did you find out if Casey can? I
have engaged Casey, but I got a big maybe from him. He wants to meet when I'm back in town, and that's not for a week. So that's really too late for me to wait. So right?
ACS guys, we might call on you special on that one.
Yeah.
Late call, depending on what Casey can do.
Yeah.
Thanks, Anne. I'm glad you got that in.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Gabrielle's, and then Consuelo's back with us, unfrozen.
My question is for Anne. Did you just say this is a private event? Because I sent out some of the information Anne Forrest had sent me, and I think I included this. So this should not have been on that list.
It is a private event. It's not a public.
Okay.
Well, that's okay. If you send it out to your Hub people, we're going to make them work, right? That's fine, right? That's what she needs. We needed to send this out to the Hub community, but it's not for the general population to attend.
Okay. Yeah, and I appreciate that it may not be as appealing for that reason, but I feel for me and for anybody else who attends, it's just a great opportunity for us to kind of practice putting on an event like this.
Consuelo, welcome back.
Thank you. Sorry, I got kicked off there.
Yeah, I think we'd actually reached the end of the questions. You know, this was really good. And you have an action to kind of, I can't remember what it was. It's written on my notes somewhere. And we'll do a follow-up briefing at the Hub Captains when you get this really finalized, and we can talk about what kind of changes we'd make to our own procedures.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll let you know when we are ready with that final point. But we still have a number of hoops to jump through internally. So we're working on it, and I'm working as fast as I can.
No, that's okay. We meet in May, and then we skip June. And so July would be the next possible opportunity. And then after that, 2 months after that.
Depending on when it is in July, I may not be here. I'm going home to Mexico for 2 weeks. And so
July 28th.
I will be not here.
Okay, well then we'll plan for August and we'll hope that the earthquake doesn't happen before August.
Yeah,
August,
let's hope.
September.
All right. Sounds good. Well,
Okay,
thank you,
any last
everybody,
things for
having
good of
me.
the order? I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Consuelo,
no, go ahead. Any
I'm going to
questions?
close it, so if you got something else.
Nope.
Okay, good of the order. Anybody else with announcements like Ann had? Anything? Otherwise, we'll cover them at the hub captain meeting. All right, thank you, everybody. I am going to stop recording.
Save chat.